I guess we can start. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining in for this online side event during the Commission on Narcotic Drugs. It's entitled Open Wound, Extrajudicial Drug War Killings in 2022, and is hosted by DRCNet Foundation, also known as StopTheDrugWar.org, and on the same website you can find all the live stream, and we invite you to share it through your social media, and where you will find the taping of today's discussion there. My name is Perduca. I'm logging in from Rome. I'm a member of the Associazione Luca, Coscioni, and also on the board of DRCNet. I will co-moderate this discussion with Dave Borden, who is the executive director of StopTheDrugWar.org. We're very happy to have four speakers today. Karen Gomez-Dumpit, who's commissioner at the Commission on Human Rights in the Philippines. Mohammad Ashrafuzzaman, who's program coordinator of the Asian Human Rights Commission. Cristiano Avila Maronna, who's board member of Justa project, and Zaved Mahmood, the Human Rights and Drug Policy Advisor at UN Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights. This is a panel that it follows up similar events that DRCNet has been organizing for the last 6 years to try and raise the issue of systematic, widespread, and very violent human rights violation committed by UN member states for the sake of the so-called war on drugs, or as the diplomats call it, the international system of drug control. Over the last few years, I would say after the second UN special session on drugs held in New York in 2016, several UN bodies have highlighted the risk of justifying human rights violations for the sake of controlling narcotics, being their trafficking or also personal use. And some countries have started to react, others haven't. And I'm afraid that some of the speakers that we will hear today are residing in countries where the message hasn't been gotten in a clear way. At the same time, I think we should commend the work of several UN working groups that have highlighted what is being done around the world, and hope that member states will take into consideration some of the recommendations also published last year. I will give now the microphone to Dave Borden, who will moderate the discussion. Thank you once again for being with us today.
So thank you, Marco. Thank you to all of you for joining us, especially our esteemed speakers. As Marco mentioned, this is one of a series, I believe 10 events we've done on this topic, and the fifth at the Commission on Narcotic Drugs. Our first in 2017 featured a video from Vice President Leni Robredo, which strongly criticized President Duterte's drug policies, and became a political incident in the Philippines after catalyzing an ultimately unsuccessful attempt to impeach the vice president. We were also joined in person by the great Chito Gascon, who was chair of the Commission on Human Rights. We are pleased to have Commissioner Karen Gomez-Dumpit joining us. I will just say that I think everyone should note the events in Ukraine right now, and they certainly emphasize the importance of rule of law. And the topic we're discussing today is part of rule of law. Been very pleased to see governments here standing up to Russia and not enabling the government to abuse the process here at the CND as they normally do. So thank you. Karen Gomez-Dumpit is Commissioner Karen Gomez-Dumpit of the Commission on Human Rights, is a recipient of the Gawad Paglinka Award from the Catholic Bishops' Conference for her work on behalf of persons deprived of liberty. She has advocated for migrant workers and has done pivotal work engaging the Commission with the UN Human Rights Council and treaty bodies. She has worked at the CHR for 25 years. And we're pleased to have her speak here for us today. So thank you for joining us, Karen.
Thank you very much for inviting me here. And just to say, of course, that I follow many speakers, as you've said, the Vice President and also our very much missed Chairperson, Chito Gascon. So allow me to just give you some broad strokes of how we view the human rights situation, but of course concentrating on the theme that we have today, and it is a very graphic representation actually of what we are experiencing. It is an open wound, extrajudicial killings brought about by the war on drugs. So I'm not going to go far, and just allow me to refresh your memories, because I want to be able to quote the High Commissioner when she rendered her report, presented it before the Human Rights Council last 2020 on the human rights situation in the Philippines. And she did say that key patterns of ongoing violations have been highlighted. While gains have been made, challenges remain. But the overarching focus on national security, counterterrorism, and illegal drugs, systematic human rights violations, of course, killings, arbitrary detention, persistent impunity, vilification of dissent is really the hallmark of the current situation that we are in. So the report, and we of course contributed to that report that was delivered by the Office of the High Commissioner, the High Commissioner herself, is that there is indeed overarching focus on public order, national security to counter illegal drugs. And the underpinning focus on national security threats, which were described as real and inflated, have really led to serious human rights violations and have to this day have been largely unattended or unaddressed. So it is also reinforced by harmful rhetoric from high-level officials, which has not stopped to this day. Even yesterday, we hear the president saying the reason why these people were killed was because of drugs. So just to be able to say that, of course, there could have been something that other branches of government could have done. We can understand if the legislature would be composed of the supermajority in support of this president, who still enjoys a very, very high popularity rating and support rating. But then when we take a look at the questions and the petitions that were brought before the Supreme Court, it also tells us that the reason why we are in this situation and why it has escalated to this level is because of the lack of check and balance. This brings us to the petitions in the Supreme Court questioning the legitimacy of the war on drugs, which are still pending. There are 3 petitions, and a timeline of this is as early as January 26 of 2017. A law group called Center Law filed the first petition, which is called the Murillo petition, questioning the issuance of command memorandum orders, which actually gave effect to Oplan Tokhang, or the war on drugs, or the campaign against illegal drugs in the government. There was also in October another case filed. This was the Dano petition. And of course, on the 11th of October, the Free Legal Assistance Group also filed a petition on the Almora petition for the issuance of a writ of amparo, a protective writ with a prohibition. But since the first petition, it has been 1,877 days that has passed. That's a little over 5 years pending today. The first tussle was actually to allow the petitioners access to the information on the victims, on the list of victims of the drug war. But there was, of course, a tug of war here, because there was an initial refusal of government to provide information because of national security. But then the Supreme Court did order that. But when government actually complied with it, the files were corrupted. So until now, there is a petition pending in the Supreme Court to ask an order from the court to order the Solicitor General to comply and provide proper copies, readable copies of this document. Of course, we all heard of the high-level panel review that was presented before the Human Rights Council by the Department of Justice. And the Secretary of Justice no less said that we will be involved in this process. But today, we have been very minimally involved in it, aside from the fact that there were pronouncements that, of course, this is considered as a movement in the right direction. At first, 50 cases were reviewed, and they found that there were infirmities, there were violations that were committed. And of course, another 250, a recent pronouncement by our Secretary of Justice has done that. No? But again, there is lack of transparency in this process, despite the fact that there was a promise and a commitment that the Commission on Human Rights will be involved. I'm going to also go into, a lot of people have said, many observers and even media personnel were asking, but the killings have slowed down. Yes, they have. Maybe because of the pandemic, but it has not stopped. That's one. And second, you know, when I'm faced with that question, I feel that I should answer properly. That the trend in killing should not be taken as a trending thing. What we need to do is accountability for all the killings that have happened. And based on our records, there are more than 3,000 that we have tried to investigate, but there was lack of cooperation or non-cooperation from authorities. And only 14 cases of the thousands to date have reached the courts, and 80 in various investigative levels. So as you can see, there is very, very minimal movement when you locate the cases in the justice system. As a last point, perhaps because I want this to be an interactive discussion as well, just to say that there is indeed a light at the end of the tunnel, if you will, because of course, as we know, that the Human Rights Council has issued a resolution on a technical cooperation for the Philippines, to help the Philippines out. And this is in the form of a UN joint program that will address the human rights situation in the country. There is hope in this, because one of the areas where we need to converge and to support is that platform on human rights-based approach to drugs control. We have launched this in July last year, and it's a 3-year program. We have yet to see concrete steps towards this program being implemented in the Philippines, but just to say that it is an important opening that we have. Last but not the least, of course, death penalty is still on the table. In fact, several months ago, there was an attempt to include again the death penalty in the amendments to the Dangerous Drugs Act. And of course, we have tried to block this. It hasn't bloomed into a full well, in the House of Representatives, in the lower house, it was passed, but in the Senate, at least, we are happy to report that perhaps because of elections, but for whatever reasons, main authors of the death penalty bill in the Senate have said the time is not now, or have withdrawn their bills. So we can have a breath we can take a breath and say that the death penalty is not on the table right now, and hopefully all throughout the rest of this Congress. Last but not the least is perhaps an interaction with the theme, because it's really a very good perhaps illustration of how EJKs are in the Philippines and how we have suffered, or the Filipinos, especially the poor, have suffered in this administration's war on drugs. And this is a picture of those who were killed early on in the campaign, who were buried in public cemeteries and are now, they now need to vacate that public cemetery because the duration is only good for 5 years. And there is a project called Project Arise, which actually deals with, coordinates with the families and asks them to exhume the body, helps them exhume the body and cremates them. No? So even until death, there is still an open wound, with more so because of the many, many orphaned families who have suffered in this drug war. I end with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Karen. Perhaps during the discussion, we'll talk a little about the ICC case and the administration, the Duterte administration's attempt to derail the investigation. Our next speaker is Mohammad Ashrafuzzaman, known to friends as Zaman. Zaman is the program coordinator for the Asian Human Rights Commission, and as well as for the Asian Legal Resource Center, where he has worked since 2007. He is a native Bangladeshi based in Hong Kong, and he is unable to return to his native Bangladesh due to his advocacy at the Human Rights Council. And thank you for joining us again today, Zaman, and I'm looking forward to your talk.
Thank you very much for hosting this discussion and also having all of us in this side event. I will try to be precisely within the time limit that you previously mentioned. So now, we have heard from Karen about the Filipino situation, and in Bangladesh, we are seeing the replication of Duterte-style war on drug by Sheikh Hasina. So the only difference is Philippines in the East Asia and Bangladesh is in South Asia, and Duterte is a man and president, and Sheikh Hasina is a woman and the prime minister, head of the government. So apart from this difference, the nature of the killing, the excuses, these are all almost the same. And then all these killings, it was, the background is important because the killing was officially launched with the title of war on drug in early May 2018, and that is the election year. In December, the country was scheduled to have its national parliamentary election, and the government was in office since 2014 without any credible election. It's basically uncontested, while all the opposition parties, centrist, leftist, rightist, everybody boycotted that election. So the ruling party and its allies all elected, most of them, more than half of them were elected unopposed without a vote being cast. And then the remaining ones, they rigged the, people also did not go to the polling centers other than the ruling party activists and supporters who were assigned to manage the election. So we need to understand this context that an authoritarian government wanted to renew its power, and it renewed illegally without legitimacy and people's mandate. And the same regime again wanted to renew its power, and it needed an excuse to eliminate some of the dissidents and the political opponents. And then war on drug was a very effective tool from their perspective to launch. And then it was started. And then I'm not going by the statistics. I mean, a few hundreds have several hundreds have been killed by all forces. It involves Rapid Action Battalion. It involves Bangladesh Border Guards. And then it also involves the regular police force and different units of the police, also the military. So all the security apparatus of the country are involved directly in this process of war on drug killing. And the victims are, in one hand, the background is the largest well-known drug lord of Bangladesh was a member of parliament of the ruling party from 2014. In 2018 election, due to some technical problem, he could not participate in the, retain his candidacy. So the ruling party was so amazed with this man that they chose his wife to be the member of parliament. And there was no election. It was rigged on the previous night before the people were supposed to start voting on the following morning. So the system was different. So in this context, the victims are, of course, opposition political members, whoever is a suspected dissident or raises voice, and very importantly, the Rohingya refugees. We don't know whether they are really involved in the drug peddling, but what we know is that the biggest and the most well-known drug lord is related to the Prime Minister. Closely associated. His wife, instead of him, is substituted to become the member of parliament without having any legislative or political background in her past. And then if the ordinary, peddlers, if we accept their version, their narratives as true statement, then if they are really the drug peddlers, so killing them is not a solution to the problem. And it doesn't say. And of course, the first thing is extrajudicially killing any person with any excuse is a gross violation of human rights. It's arbitrary deprivation of life. And this is not acceptable in anywhere in the civilized human world. And that's why, as human rights activists, we, any kind of arbitrary deprivation, we are against that. We don't want that. And then if we talk about the possibility of redress, so there is zero possibility of redress. Why I'm saying that? You cannot show one example that the extrajudicially killed victims or their families have ever got justice in Bangladesh. No instance. There is one of the ruling party people. There are two political factions of the ruling party in the outskirts of the capital city. So one group paid money to the Rapid Action Battalion, some 60 million. And then after receiving that money on condition of, killing some people. So a group of politicians, including a councillor of the city, was abducted, and a lawyer, from when he came out of the court premises. So the Rapid Action Battalion abducted him and his associates, 5 people. And then their car, just behind that car, there was a lawyer's car. He was going for his lunch at home. And he and his driver saw that, allegedly, they saw that incident of abduction by the Rapid Action Battalion. So the perpetrators became afraid that, okay, some people have become witness now, so we also need to eliminate that witness. So for that, this driver and the lawyer, these two people were also abducted and later their bodies found. They remained disappeared for a few days. Their bodies were floating in the neighboring river. And then there has had a prosecution so far. That is only one instance of extrajudicial killing or disappearance, whatever you say, that in Bangladesh, so far we have seen any prosecution. Apart from that, not a single instance of the thousands of killing that has happened under the government, the incumbent government. There has not been any single instance of prosecution. Then you have the rewarding of these perpetrators. Perpetrators are rewarded with gallantry medals, like Presidential Medal, Police Medal, and that kind of, and lucrative postings like the topmost person having the command responsibility was ambassador, appointed as ambassador to Spain, and somebody is in now Saudi Arabia as ambassador, the former police chief. The former Rapid Action Battalion chief who started this killing later made the chief of the police, he's incumbent police chief now. So within the domestic system, I mean jurisdiction, there is only impunity and rewarding the perpetrator. So now the human rights groups and the victims have the only options left is approaching to the UN human rights mechanism or other jurisdictional mechanism if there is any, like international criminal court, ICC, that kind of institutions. So we know ICC is a very time-consuming process, and they want to get their Rohingya things done with the assistance of Bangladesh government, and that's why they don't want to disturb the Bangladesh government.
Time, please.
Yes. So to block their access to that country. So we understand that. And they also very nicely communicate with a particular group of civil society organizations, not those who are very much critical about the government regarding this civil and political rights problem. So, and then only the good thing that I will finish in a few sentences. One is the UN treaty bodies like CAT committee and the special procedures, they have been vocal quite consistently, not too much as we see about Philippines or Sri Lanka in other countries' case, but about Bangladesh, even last week they have spoken. I mean, this week on Monday. So, including enforced disappearances and extrajudicial killings. And the most inspiring thing for the victims' perspective is the sanction designated by the United States Treasury Department, and that has an impact on that. Now they are publicly not going for extrajudicial killings. It's still happening, but the scale has been reduced. There are a lot of torture and arbitrary detention going on various excuses through Digital Security Act and other draconian legislations. But since the sanction designated by the United States government, we see a little change of pattern of human rights abuses. Having said that, the victims of enforced disappearances, their families are facing, a serious form of repression and reprisal and intimidation by the agencies of the state. So I will stop there. And if there is any question in the next round, we will try to respond to that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Zaman. Our next speaker is Cristiano Avila Maronna. Cristiano is a criminal law attorney with a PhD in criminal law from the University of Sao Paulo, and he's a board member of Justa project. He is also former president of the Brazilian Institute of sorry, my document got moved around. He is also former president of the Brazilian Institute of Criminal Sciences and co-founder and former executive secretary of Brazilian Drug Policy Platform. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, David. I would like to I would like to say that it's a great honor to be here at this online event. Well, greetings to David Borden, Marco Perduca, Karin Gomez-Dumpit, Mohammad, Ashrafuzzaman, and Zaved Mahmood. Karin update us on the situation in the Philippines. Mohammad talked about Bangladesh, and Zaved will bring us a global perspective. It was up to me to talk about Brazil, about extrajudicial executions in the context of the war on drugs. Well, let me start reminding that the federal constitution of Brazil from 1988 prohibits the death penalty except in the case of declared war. Despite the constitutional prohibition, there is an epidemic of intentional violent deaths in Brazil, and most of them are not clarified because police investigations are unable to identify the perpetrators. By the way, Brazil was in the last place among the 30 countries analyzed in the Global Drug Policy Index published last November by the Harm Reduction Consortium. One of the reasons for Brazil's poor performance in the Global Drug Policy Index was precisely the question about extrajudicial killing. They asked what extent is the practice of extrajudicial killing prevalent in the course of military and police anti-drug activity. And the answer they found was to a very large extent. In 2020, according to the most recent data available, there were more than 50,000 intentional violent deaths in Brazil. 6,460 people were killed by the Brazilian police in 2020. According to the yearbook of the Brazilian Forum on Public Security, in 2020, the country had the highest number of deaths as a result of police interventions since the indicator began to be monitored by the Brazilian Forum on Public Security. With more than 6,000 fatalities from interventions by police, on average, in Brazil, police produced 17.6 deaths per day. Since 2013, the first year of the series monitored, growth has been on the order of 190%. I would like to highlight growth in deaths from police interventions in 2020 in Brazil, a year marked by the pandemic, the reduced movement of people, the expressive reduction in all crimes against property, and the 31.8% drop in deaths from police interventions in Rio de Janeiro, which went from 110,000 in 2019, the highest number in the historical series, to 1,245 in 2020. A still high number, but which started to fall from the middle of the year when the Brazilian Federal Supreme Court issued an order to limit police operations in Rio de Janeiro's communities. Most of those killed by the police in Brazil are men, 98.4%, are Black, 78.9%, and young people, 76.2%, as occurred in the Jacarezinho massacre in May 2021 in Rio de Janeiro, when the police killed 29 people in the most lethal police operation at all times. According to the World Just Project Rule of Law Index, criminal investigation system in Brazil is not effective, criminal adjudication system is not timely nor effective, correctional system is not effective in reducing criminal behavior, and criminal system is not impartial. Police officers responsible for unlawful killings in Brazil are rarely brought to justice. Criminal justice systems currently rely almost entirely on police investigators to solve these cases. Police crimes are left to be investigated by civil police investigators. The immunity logic, which shields the police officers who kill, remains omnipresent end-to-end in the justice system. On the one hand, it uses an institutional arrangement that values rationality and formalism to bring the democratic state to its knees. On the other hand, it appreciates the idea of checks and balances to use a multiplicity of interventions that guarantee a network of police protection, in the words of Brazilian researcher Poliana Ferreira. In 2019 in Brazil, more than 79,000 people disappeared, a number that dropped to 62,857 in 2020. If we add intentional violent deaths with disappearance in 2020 in Brazil, we reach more than 110,000 people, more than war zones. Brazil faces its own particular war against poor people, war against Black people. It's not about drugs, it's about racism, it's about power. And today in Brazil, extrajudicial killing is a commodity who provides political power in favor of right-wing extremists. I think that's it for now, and I'm available for the debate. Thank you once more, David.
Thank you, Cristiano. So our final presenter today is Zaved Mahmood, who works at the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights in Geneva, where he is advisor on drug policies and human rights, as well as on other serious human rights violations. He previously served as OHCHR's focal point on the abolition of the death penalty and worked with UN peacekeeping missions in Sudan and Afghanistan, and at UNICEF's Innocenti Research Center in Florence, Italy. He studied international law, human rights, and politics in Austria, Bangladesh, France, Germany, and the United Kingdom. Thank you, Zaved, for supporting our event by joining us today.
David, can you hear me? Yes, thank you. First of all, just congratulations for organizing this event, very important event. Yesterday, we had an event on death penalty. Then the issue was that what about extrajudicial claim with regard to drug policy? So I invited the participant to come and join here. So I can see some of them here. I welcome them. And also at the outset, I would like to say thank you, Madam Karen Guzman, for your always support to the office and your leadership on this particular area, and other participants and speakers. Also, I just looked at the participant list. I can see a lot of known faces. I wish all of you are here in Vienna. I'm calling you from Vienna at the CND. The CND session is going on. Due to the COVID, a lot of you couldn't come, but I'm looking forward to meet up a lot of you in the near future. And with that note, I would like to start with my presentation with one statement which Secretary General Guterres, when he came first in 2017, said in her first statement with regard to drug. Just I'm quoting from there, that he said that it is vital that we examine the effectiveness on war on drug approach and its consequences for human rights. So it is very powerful statement from the Secretary General. I would like to add with that our High Commissioner has emphasized that the right to life should be respected and protected by law enforcement agencies in their effort to address drug-related crimes, and only proportional force should be used where necessary. Another entity I would like to refer to in my statement, that is Special Rapporteur mandate holders of the Human Rights Council. Some of you already mentioned to that. They have said the allegation of drug trafficking offenses should be judged in a court of law, not by gunmen on the street. That is the important issues also I would like to mention, that in this war on drugs, it's not only the state apparatus involved, there are other gunmen of the street involved and associated with them. That is important aspect also. We need to look at that non-state actors, how being also involved in the war on drugs. With that note, I would like to take you back almost 50 years back, when President Nixon coined this word, war on drugs. And since then, this war on drugs has rolled in different countries. We have seen the harsh legislation in 70s and 80s in the whole Latin America region. Even law was adopted somewhere, drafted somewhere, and brought back in the country, and harsh legislation, punitive legislation, giving more power to the police authority or security apparatus without any accountability. Now what we are seeing, it has historical background. I think that that is important. We need to take note very carefully. With that note, I would like to mention that High Commissioner recent year published 2 reports looking at the human rights implication with regard to drug policy in 2015, just before the UN special session on world drug, widely known Angus 2016. And after that, in 2018, another report on the implementation of the commitment of the August 2016. In the outcome document of the August 2016 of that special session of the United Nations, all member states committed one thing. I would like to refer one particular paragraph of that outcome document, chapter 4, which is related to human rights, and paragraph O, if you look at, I will post later on, there is one commitment by all member states to eliminate impunity with regard to human rights violation. So we looked at that. What actually that commitment, how much being respected by the member state in the High Commissioner report in 2018. It is alarming to say the tendency we have seen towards deeper militarization of responses by states to counter drug-related offense crimes. And even in some countries, after the August outcome document, was adopted, and where there is a big human rights commitment, even after that, in some countries where already mentioned that human rights violation increase. There is a lack of implementation of the commitment. In some states, instances, this is associated with the progressive militarization of civilian for police forces. Several institutional reform and new laws have come into force in many regions in the world, which have facilitated militarization process in the context of drug operations. Submission indicated, when we are reporting this report, we got a lot of submission or contribution from the civil society, National Human Rights Institution, and other institutions. It shows that excessive use of force is more likely to occur when military and special security forces are involved in drug operation. Already we have heard from Bangladesh that how the drug control operation was conducted. And so these are the pattern we are seeing. Such approach has disproportionately affected vulnerable groups, has repeatedly resulted in serious human rights violation. Just when military and special forces, when their responsibility, defense, and others involving in civilian activities, then definitely is a result. In other contexts, we have seen that is a more serious human rights violation, rather solving the problem, quote unquote, so-called world drug problem. The Special Rapporteur on Extrajudicial Summary and Arbitrary Execution is stated that the various threats, including drug dealing, challenge the adequacy of the traditional enforcement measurement. He affirmed that the use of lethal force by law enforcement officers must be regulated within the framework of international human rights law, and is standard to strict necessity and rhetoric to kill should never be used. But when this responsibility, the addressing the drug problem and all these things provided to the military or security forces, obviously all these principles being undermined, ignored, or not adhered to at all. I don't want to go to different country situation, but let me highlight that other international mechanism, how they are looking at it. Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, I'm happy to see that our colleague from Brazil here made a presentation, has recognized the militarization of many years of different countries in the Latin America region in the war of drugs has led to an increase in the excessive use for and in levels of impunity and a record number of human rights violations, including extrajudicial killing. A special procedure mechanism also of the UN addresses this issue. The war on drugs approach in many other states has caused the life of thousands of people and caused serious human rights violation. But who are those people? Already our colleagues mentioned about poor who are being poverty, racism. We have seen in the name of drug operation, which part of the city being attacked by the authority. It is Santi area or the Bastis or where poor people lives, they are being attacked. This is the war against poor people. There is no doubt about that. It is not that where this middle-class society or celebrity being attacked under this war, who are known to use this, even politicians known to use the war, drug and all these things, even publicly they have admitted to that. War, drug, war not against them, it is against the people, poor people. Our colleague from the Brazil mentioned about the racism issue. The last year, our High Commissioner issued a landmark report on racism and law enforcement. In that report, it is very clearly highlighted that how drug law enforcement and race has played a role in the killing of thousands of people or thousands, particularly African and African descent, not only in the West, but also we have recorded this issue in the global South in many countries, particularly in the Latin America region as well. In Brazil, colleague mentioned that in Colombia, in Mexico, other part of the world. Yesterday, we had even an arbitrary detention. We had one speaker. She was a transgender activist. She was 11 years in the prison for drug-related offenses and suffer tremendous torture, violence, and all these other serious human rights violations. Lastly, I would like to highlight that what's happening at the CND level. It is, we are encouraged to see that International Narcotic Board, which regularly monitoring the 3 convention, they have started addressing this issue. Let me read out one paragraph from their recent report, which they have published last week. And in that report, they highlighted one thing, that extrajudicial responses to drug control measures is a violation of International 3 Convention itself. In the Ministerial Declaration of 2019 on the World Drug Problem, all member states also mentioned that the responses, which is not in conformity with international human rights law and in the 3 Convention, poses challenge to address this problem. Why is that? When you wage a war against the poor or particular population, you undermine the confidence of the people that you are doing something good for the people. The 3 Convention is particularly highlight that protecting people public health. The drug issues need to be addressed from public health issues, not waging war against poor people of African descent or other minorities. In this regard, also, I'd like to highlight that plight of the women in this war on drugs. Increasingly, the women are being targeted in this war. And now data shows that the disproportionate number of women in the prison for drug-related offenses. In some cases, disappearance reported, even killing has been reported, women being affected because it is related with the migrants worker particularly, And yesterday in the side event, we heard that how migrant workers are targeted with the death penalty and other measures, punitive measures in this so-called war on drugs. I would like to end with the recommendation of the I was trying to find out exact line. International narcotic control boards, they have strongly recommended, in line with international human rights law, also other mechanisms recommendation, that government need to stop extrajudicial responses, and these killing need to be investigated properly, and whoever responsible hold accountable. In this context, I would really appreciate the role of the civil society in collecting evidence and preserving evidence, collecting evidence, and producing when it is necessary. That is important. Also, another aspect very important, and that we discussed with Karen when I visited in 2017 in Manila, the protection of victims and victims' family. That we need to also, when we are talking about this war, accountability obviously needed, who are responsible, but the protection of the victim and witnesses should be part and parcel of our program thinking, and any way we would like to address this issue. And in this civil society's role, obviously, no doubt, I have no doubt that all of us, we agree that. But we can see that more and more this space, civic space, has been shrinking. That is alarming situation. High Commissioner and Secretary General has reported regularly to the EU Human Rights Council and others that how civic space is shrinking. Recently, International Drug Policy Consortium just 2 days back has published how civil society organizations who work on the drug-related issues being barred by the ECOSOC NGO committee to join UN. That need to be changed. We have more to do. That with yesterday at the CND, I made a statement and clearly mentioned that in the outcome document, all government heads agreed to work with the civil society closely, but we need to make a space where civil society can work without any threat, harassment, and persecution. With that note, I would like to hand over and thank you again, David and other colleagues, to see that. And also I see on the list from Bangladesh, Adil and Zalja and others who are participating. Thank you for joining with us. Over to you, David.
Well, thank you, Zaved. We will keep this room open for questions and discussion as long as people wish to continue doing that. If you need to leave for another side event, and they are scheduled to start right now, apologies, we didn't have time to work that in before, but I'm putting my email address here in the chat, also our website, and I'll be happy to forward anything to speakers for you. With that, do we have any questions for our speakers? Well, I have a question for Karen. Oh, Zaved, did you have your hand up?
Yes, I was going to ask also Karen.
Okay, well, I'll...
thank you, Karen.
I have a question.
May I?
Oh, sure.
Thank you for raising this issue joint program, that one. And I would like to get your views that how civil society can be joined this program more extensively. And you mentioned about only one component of the joint program, that is drug policy, but it has also first one national accountability mechanism, strengthening national accountability mechanism for investigating all the crimes which has been committed. But I would like to request you to reflect on that, civil society, and what progress has been done. You mentioned, but this program really is going to address this issue, but what you would like to see this program should, if there is any changes needed into the structure, please openly you can mention, or even you can share with us later. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Zaved. No? Let me just say that there are 6 areas, of course. Human rights-based approach to drugs control. You did mention domestic, investigative, and accountability measures. There's also data gathering on alleged police violations. National reporting for national mechanism for reporting and follow-up. And then there's also counterterrorism, human rights-based approach to counterterrorism. But one of the things that's really, really very important is actually civic engagement with civil society and the Commission on Human Rights. That's the 6th. No? And one of the things that we feel is a weakness here is the fact that there is no direct mention of victims, particularly victims of human rights violations in general, but really in particular, the victims of the war on drugs. But then what we want to do is to be able to strengthen that. You know, if you ask civil society in the Philippines, if they have joined the UN Joint Program, I can tell you that they have. But one of the things that I'd like to see an improvement on is a broader invitation to civil society to be able to engage in the UN Joint Program. There has been, well, calibrated openness to civil society, but at the same time, civil society is also quite skeptical about the UN Joint Program because, as we all know, the human rights community in the Philippines really wanted a commission on inquiry, a commission of inquiry on the human rights situation in the Philippines. But what they have been saying also is that we cannot just disengage. Their mode is really critical engagement. And for so long as they have a safe space within the UNJP or within the joint program, then I think civil society will have more confidence in engaging with government through this particular facility.
Thank you.
We have a hand up, I think, from Zama.
Thank you very much, David. I mean, in this panel, I mean, it's good to raise. That's why I thought that agreeing with Karan, just want to supplement that the kind of arbitrary deprivation of life, extrajudicial execution in the pretext of war on drug that is going on in Bangladesh, and I don't think that it is going to end anytime soon. And the importance of collecting evidence and doing that, the level of threat that prevails due to the reprisal on human rights activists based in Bangladesh has also needs to be considered with a very high importance. And then from the UN human rights mechanism perspective, civil society and the UN, the OHCHR and CND, I mean, from both entities, how we can work together to bring a mandate, I mean, through resolution and I mean, other formalities of the UN that will also paved the way to collect evidence, because only for Bangladesh-based human rights activists, it's not easy. It's you simply don't have access. And anybody who dares to do that will also be disappeared or extrajudicially eliminated. So that risk remains there. Who knows the ground realities of Bangladesh? This is undeniable. And so, for example, we have seen about Sri Lanka, there is the mandate has got the authority to collect evidence for the crimes committed there. So with the similar perspective, whether the UN can be exercising its own capacity and mandate to come up with this, and we from the civil society, we will be happy to engage and support the process with our capacities at the same time. So that's briefly I wanted to mention. And I think I'll stay in touch with Javed Mahmood for several reasons, including the official capacity that you have in Geneva.
Do we have any additional questions? I guess I'll ask, and apologies for having my video off. The internet connection here at the UN usually is very good, but mine is not working that well right now. Karen, anything you would like to offer with regard to the ICC case? And say, noting the investigation is currently on pause under a treaty action by the Philippines, by the Philippine government, which they are allowed to take under the treaty, asking for the decision to investigate to be reconsidered, and on the basis of their claims to have an accountability process. You had something to say about that so-called process, or the nature of the process, but yeah, anything you'd like to say about the ICC case, its importance, impact on the Philippines, etc.?
Well, thank you for that question, David. Of course, well, government, certain government authorities who are involved in that particular case are actually very wary of the ICC process. But let me just say that this is very new, even to the Commission, and we're still, of course, asking for help on how to understand the ICC processes. But having said that, we have learned that, of course, it's a natural course for a state or a government to ask for a suspension of the proceedings. And we were told that that is actually part of the process of the ICC. And it would be more of a shock if the Philippine government did not ask for that. But I think the ball is now in the court of government, because the prosecutor has asked them for more evidence to show that it is really undertaking, it is not unwilling, and it is able to handle all these cases that have happened on the ground, no? And to be able to address it. We're at that point now where government is being asked to give more evidence on that. Now, we were also told that the suspension would last probably 6 months. And perhaps maybe in the next few weeks or so, we would be able to hear from the office of the prosecutor if that that timeline is correct, whether he would proceed or not with the investigation or further suspend it. The Philippines is now at the cusp of changing hands in terms of governance, and come May 9, we will have a general elections. So that could also perhaps realign the forces that have allowed this kind of operations against drugs to operate, to be conducted. So maybe there will be a change in response of government because there is a change in government. So let's hope and wait and see, no, with respect to what the ICC is going to do next.
Thank you. Does anyone else have a question or comment? Well, then I will again thank our speakers and my usual co-moderator, Marco Perduca, member of our board, and to all of you for joining us, in some cases quite early in the morning, in other cases well into a Friday evening when you deserve to be having fun instead, some of which is possible even now during this continued pandemic. So I will let everyone go on to their next activities. And I'll type my email address again. Anyone wishes to do follow-up, send a question, be connected with anyone else here. And yes, thank you for joining us. Good afternoon, good morning, good night.
Thank you. Stay